I think it's best if Noah sits this one out." My sister Melissa's words hung in the air like poison. The room didn't go silent. Conversations continued, glasses clinked, someone laughed in the corner. But in my world, everything stopped. She didn't even have the decency to look at me when she said it. Just continued adjusting the tripod for the family portrait, her voice as casual as if she'd suggested changing the lighting. Noah, my 12-year-old son, stood frozen by the bookshelf, where he'd been straightening his tie. I watched his reflection in the window glass, the slight widening of his eyes, the way his shoulders tensed, and then that familiar expression I'd grown to hate. The careful, practiced mask he wore when trying not to show how much something hurt. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Rebecca Mitchell. I'm 35 years old, a second-grade teacher at Pinecrest Elementary, and a single mom to the most amazing kid you'll ever meet. I never planned to be sharing this story with strangers on the internet, but sometimes the most painful moments of our lives become the most important to tell. That Sunday afternoon at my parents' estate in Oak Ridge, Connecticut, was supposed to be a celebration, their 40th wedding anniversary, complete with catered food, professional photography, and relatives from 5 different states. The kind of occasion where everyone dresses in coordinating colors and pretends to like each other more than they actually do. The morning had started with such promise. Noah spent an hour getting ready, carefully slicking down his unruly brown curls and practicing his smile in the bathroom mirror. "Do I look like I belong in a fancy family photo, Mom?" he'd asked, adjusting his borrowed necktie for the 20th time. "You look perfect," I told him, straightening his collar. The spitting image of a Mitchell man. That's when he got quiet, the way he always did when family identity came up. "But I'm not really a Mitchell, am I? Not like everyone else." I knelt in front of him, heart aching at how much weight a 12-year-old shouldn't have to carry. "You have Mitchell blood running through your veins. Never doubt that." He nodded, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. I couldn't blame him. When your entire family treats you like an inconvenient footnote to their polished narrative, you start to believe it. We'd been estranged from the Mitchell family for nearly 4 years. 4 years of building our little life in a cozy 2-bedroom apartment across the state, far from the whispers and sidelong glances. 4 years of school, plays where the grandparent seats remained empty, of holidays spent creating our own traditions because the old ones had been closed to us. But then my mother called 2 weeks ago, her voice sounding older, perhaps a little desperate around the edges. "Please, Rebecca, your father isn't getting any younger. This anniversary means so much to him." I almost said no. The memories of that final Christmas battle still burned. My father, Thomas Mitchell, standing in his study, checkbook in hand, offering to take care of the problem, as he'd called my pregnancy. My mother, Elizabeth, with her perpetually disappointed eyes, suggesting adoption to the right sort of family. My siblings, Melissa and Andrew, standing by in silent agreement, the perfect Mitchell children who never strayed from the carefully plotted course. "We have a reputation in this community," my father had said, his voice low, controlled. "Generations of respectability. What you're proposing, raising a child alone, without even naming the father, it's selfish, Rebecca." I'd walked out that night with nothing but a suitcase and the absolute certainty that my child would never be treated as a mistake. I was 3 months pregnant and terrified, but something stronger than fear carried me forward. Determination, perhaps, or just the simple knowledge that whatever grew inside me deserved better than conditional love. The Mitchells of Oak Ridge were Connecticut aristocracy, not through old money, though they had plenty of that, but through careful cultivation of the right connections, the right schools, the right careers. My father built his investment firm by understanding what people valued most: the appearance of unshakable success. My mother maintained their social standing by serving on the right charity boards and hosting the right events. My brother became a cardiac surgeon, and Melissa followed my father into finance. And me? I was supposed to be the attorney, rounding out the family portfolio of impressive careers. I'd even completed 2 years of law school before I realized I was following someone else's dream. The pregnancy just accelerated a derailment that was already underway. I became a teacher instead. Found out I was good at it. Great, even. There's something deeply satisfying about helping second graders discover their potential, watching their faces light up when they finally understand something that had seemed impossible moments before. It doesn't come with a corner office or country club membership, but it filled spaces in me I hadn't known were empty. Noah was born on a Tuesday morning in October, a shock of dark hair and solemn eyes that seemed to take in everything. No Mitchell had ever been born with such dark features. They were uniformly fair-haired and pale-eyed for generations. Another mark against him in my family's genetic ledger. Still, there were small bridges built over those years of separation. It wasn't my parents who extended themselves. It was my grandfather, Edward Mitchell Sr., my father's father. Grandpa, Ed was different from the rest. A self-made man who remembered what it meant to struggle, who valued character over appearance. He was in his 80s now, partially retired from the company he'd built and handed to my father decades ago. While my parents and siblings maintained their polished distance, Grandpa Ed would appear occasionally at our apartment door, usually without warning. "Thought the boy might like this," he'd say gruffly, holding out a model plane kit or a geology set. He never stayed long. His loyalty to my father was strong despite their differences, but those brief connections meant everything. "You're doing right by him," he told me once, his voice barely audible as he watched Noah meticulously organizing his rock collection by type. "No matter what the rest of them say, remember that. You're doing right by him, Rebecca." It was the only validation I'd received from anyone in my family, and I clung to it during the hardest nights when doubt crept in. 3 months ago, Grandpa Ed passed away. Peacefully in his sleep, they said. I wasn't called until the funeral arrangements had already been made. When Noah and I arrived at the service, we were seated in the back, away from the immediate family. A clear message about our place in the Mitchell hierarchy. Noah didn't say anything, but I saw him watching my father accept condolences, saw the longing in his eyes for a connection he'd never been allowed to have. A week after the funeral, the anniversary invitation arrived, heavy cream cardstock with gold embossing, formal as a royal decree. Please join us in celebrating Thomas and Elizabeth Mitchell's 40th wedding anniversary. I nearly tossed it in the recycling bin without a second thought. What's that? Noah had asked, peering over my shoulder. Nothing important, I'd replied. Too quickly, sliding it under a stack of bills. But that night, I found him sitting on his bed, staring at the invitation he'd retrieved from the trash. Could we go? He asked quietly. Just this once? Noah, these aren't people who have been kind to us, I said carefully. They're not going to suddenly change because we show up at a party. He nodded thoughtfully, turning the card over in his hands. I know. But Grandpa Ed always said family is complicated, that sometimes people get things wrong before they get them right. He looked up at me with those serious eyes that always seemed to see more than they should. Maybe this is their way of trying to get things right? I doubted it. The invitation was almost certainly my mother's attempt to keep up appearances, all family present for the milestone photographs, no conspicuous absences to explain to the country club set. But Noah had so little family in his life. Who was I to deny him the chance to reach for connection, however fragile? So I RSVP'd. Yes, bought Noah his first proper suit, and drove the 90 minutes to Oak Ridge with knots in my stomach and promises to myself that we would leave at the first sign of hurt. The first 2 hours at the Mitchell estate were a masterclass in polite pretense. My mother kissed the air near my cheek and commented on how healthy I looked, her perpetual code for "you've gained weight." My father shook Noah's hand with formal distance, as though greeting a stranger's child at a business function. Melissa's twin daughters, Isabella and Olivia, perfect blonde replicas of their mother, stared openly at Noah before whispering behind their hands. Only my brother Andrew showed genuine warmth, pulling Noah into a brief side hug and quietly asking about school as he refilled my wine glass for the third time. "Hang in there," he muttered. "Mom's got the photographer scheduled for 4 o'clock. Then we can all relax." The photographer, a fashionably austere woman with a sleek bob and minimalist black clothing, arrived precisely on schedule. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She began organizing the family with practiced efficiency, positioning people on and around the sweeping staircase that had been featured in Architectural Digest when my parents renovated 5 years ago. Older generation seated, please. Siblings. Standing behind. Grandchildren arranged by height on the steps. Noah moved to take his place among the cousins, straightening his shoulders with determination. That's when Melissa spoke those cutting words. "I think it's best if Noah sits this one out." I stepped forward instantly, heat flooding my face. "What did you just say about my son?" Melissa didn't even flinch. She continued adjusting the angle of the camera tripod, not bothering to look at me. "Be reasonable, Rebecca. This is for the formal portrait, the one that's going in the anniversary album and on the wall in the main hall. Noah can be in some candid shots later." My mother, rearranging her anniversary pearls in the hallway mirror, finally spoke. "It's just that, well, he doesn't quite fit the aesthetic we're going for." The room didn't exactly go silent. The caterers were still moving through with trays of champagne. Cousins were still chatting by the fireplace, but everything in my immediate vicinity seemed to freeze. Noah stood perfectly still, his expression carefully blank in that way I'd come to recognize as deep hurt. That's when I noticed something in his hand. An envelope, aged to a soft yellow, with his name written across the front in Grandpa Ed's distinctive, shaky handwriting. "Grandpa gave me this the last time he visited," Noah said quietly, his voice steady despite the tension around him. "He told me to open it if I ever felt like I didn't belong." Melissa's head snapped up, her perfect composure cracking slightly. "That's probably just one of Dad's random notes," she said quickly, stepping away from the camera and reaching for the envelope. "He was always writing little things to people, nothing important." Andrew appeared at my elbow, a fresh glass of wine in hand, though I hadn't finished my last one. "Let's not turn this into a scene, Becca," he murmured. "We're trying to create a nice memory for Mom and Dad." But Noah had already stepped back, clutching the envelope against his chest. His eyes found mine across the room, silently asking, "Permission." My father cleared his throat from his position in the center armchair. "Whatever that is, it can wait until after the photographs. Everyone is ready now." My mother nodded in agreement. "We've scheduled exactly 45 minutes for these portraits, Rebecca. The light is perfect right now." Her tone made it clear that my child's feelings were less important than the quality of the anniversary album. That might have been the end of it, Noah quietly stepping aside. Another small rejection added to the collection we'd both been gathering for years. But then came an unexpected voice. "But Grandma, you said family means everybody." Lily, Andrew's 5-year-old daughter, spoke up from her position on the bottom step. She was the youngest grandchild, usually overlooked in the shadow of Melissa's more polished twins. "If Noah doesn't get to be in the picture, does that mean he's not family?" Andrew's face flushed as he gently touched his daughter's shoulder. "Of course Noah is family, sweetheart. It's just the formal portrait has a certain look we're going for." Lily's brow furrowed in the particular way of children confronting adult hypocrisy. "But last week you got mad at Tommy Bryant when he wouldn't let me play soccer because I'm a girl. You said excluding people is wrong and mean." An uncomfortable silence followed, broken only by the soft click of the photographer's camera being adjusted. Lily looked at Noah, her expression earnest. "I think you should read what Great-Grandpa wrote. He was the oldest, wisest Mitchell, right? That's what Daddy always says." Noah looked at me again, and this time I nodded. Whatever was in that envelope, it couldn't possibly make this situation worse. With careful movements, Noah opened the envelope. Inside was a folded document and what appeared to be a small brass key. His eyes widened as he scanned the first few lines. "It's Great-Grandpa's will," he said, surprise evident in his voice. Not the official one, but he calls it his personal wishes document. My father stood abruptly, his anniversary celebration clearly derailed. "Noah, that's enough. Whatever my father gave you, it can't supersede the legal will that's already been executed." But Noah wasn't looking at my father. He was reading, his expression shifting from confusion to something like wonder. Without a word, he crossed the room and handed the document to me. My hands trembled slightly as I held the paper. Grandpa Ed's distinctive handwriting covered both sides of the heavy stationery, the letters shaky but determined. "To my great-grandson, Noah, who reminds me of myself in all the ways that matter most. By the time you're reading this, I will have failed to correct a grievous wrong during my lifetime. Your mother was cast aside for choosing to bring you into this world, a world made infinitely better by your presence in it. I lacked the courage to stand firmly against the tide of family disapproval while I lived, a failure that has shamed me daily. This is my attempt to make amends, however inadequate. The enclosed key opens my personal safe in the library of the main house. Inside, you will find legal documents establishing a trust in your name. Mitchell Holdings includes numerous properties and investments, but the most significant is Clearwater, the family estate on Lake Champlain that has been in our family for 3 generations. This property, which has been mistakenly assumed to be part of the main estate inheritance, was separated into a distinct trust 20 years ago. According to the documents in my safe, Clearwater and its endowment now belong solely to you, along with funds earmarked specifically for your education and future. More importantly, you'll find the truth about your father, whom I came to know and respect deeply during the last years of my life. He is not the irresponsible drifter this family has led you to believe. His name is James Harrington, and he has been searching for you since before you were born. The circumstances that kept him from you were engineered by those who should have welcomed him, a wrong I have tried to right in my final years. Rebecca was always the most courageous of my grandchildren. She reminds me of my late wife Harriet, who taught me that family is defined by love and integrity, not appearances or convenience. This is a lesson I hope is not too late for the rest of the Mitchells to learn. The Mitchell name has opened doors for generations, but it means nothing without the strength of character to walk through them with honor. Noah, you have that strength in abundance, whether you carry our name or not. As I finished reading, the room remained utterly silent. My father's face had gone pale beneath his carefully maintained tan. My mother's hand clutched at her pearls, as though seeking stability. Melissa stood frozen by the camera. Her perfect composure finally cracked. Before anyone could stop him, Noah walked purposefully toward the library. I followed, as did my father and Andrew. The wood-paneled room still smelled of Grandpa Ed's pipe tobacco, though he'd officially quit smoking decades ago. Noah went unerringly to the antique mahogany desk, not my father's current workspace, but the original desk that had belonged to Grandpa Ed since the company's founding. With steady hands, Noah inserted the small brass key into a nearly invisible lock on the bottom right drawer, a compartment I'd been expressly forbidden to touch as a child. It opened with a soft click. Inside lay a thick folder of legal documents bound with the Mitchell & Son law firm's distinctive blue ribbon, but also a collection of photographs I'd never seen before. Grandpa Ed smiling broadly next to a handsome, dark-haired man who looked startlingly like an adult version of Noah. The two of them examining architectural plans spread across a table. A more recent photo of Grandpa Ed, this stranger, and Noah at what appeared to be the Bronx Zoo, a trip I'd been told was just a day out with great-grandpa when Noah was 8. "His name is James Harrington," Noah said, reading from a letter that had been paperclipped to the photos. "He's an architect specializing in sustainable design. He lives in Burlington, Vermont." Noah's voice grew quieter. "Great-grandpa helped him find me when I was 7. They've been meeting a few times a year since then, but they agreed to wait until I was older before telling everyone." He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a mix of emotions I couldn't fully decipher. "He wants to meet you, Mom, officially this time." My father snatched the legal documents from the desk, flipping through them with growing agitation. "This is impossible. Dad would never have done this without telling me. I'm the executor of his estate." "Apparently not all of it," Andrew said quietly, peering over our father's shoulder at the documents. "The Clearwater Trust was established separately, completely legal, and completely binding." As I stood there, trying to process what was happening, pieces began clicking into place. A puzzle I hadn't known I was solving. Grandpa Ed's sudden interest in taking Noah for educational outings. The unexplained weekend trips my son returned from with new knowledge about architecture and design. The private phone calls that ended abruptly whenever I entered the room. Grandpa Ed hadn't been just spoiling his great-grandson. He'd been building a bridge. While outwardly maintaining peace with my father and respecting the family's boundaries, he'd been secretly creating connections for Noah, ensuring he knew both sides of his heritage. And James, this stranger who shared my son's features, hadn't abandoned us as I'd been led to believe. According to the letters in the file, he'd been searching, finding, waiting, respecting boundaries while refusing to disappear completely. My mother had followed us into the library and now sank heavily into a leather armchair, her anniversary dress crumpling beneath her. "Dad never told us any of this," she said, looking accusingly at my father. "He tried," I said suddenly. Memories, surfacing of tense conversations I'd overheard during holiday gatherings years ago. "There were so many times Grandpa Ed tried to bring up James, and you all shut him down. Remember that Thanksgiving when he mentioned a deserving young architect for the Hamilton project? Or the Christmas he suggested we might expand our definition of family?" My father's jaw tightened. Those were business discussions. He never indicated— "He did," Andrew interrupted, surprising everyone. "He tried to tell you dozens of times. I was there for some of those conversations, Dad. You just refused to hear it." The photographer, displaying impressive professional detachment, quietly packed her equipment and left without taking a single portrait. The catering staff moved through the rooms like ghosts, clearing champagne flutes from stunned hands. Relatives drifted toward the exits with mumbled excuses about long drives home and early Monday meetings. My mother remained in the library armchair, staring blankly at the wall of leather-bound books. My father retreated to his home office with the trust documents, already on the phone with the family attorney. Melissa herded her bewildered twins upstairs, her voice unnaturally bright as she promised them ice cream and a movie. Andrew stayed, sitting heavily on the leather sofa across from me, his perfect Mitchell posture finally collapsing under the weight of revelations. "Did you know?" he asked quietly. "About Grandpa Ed and James?" I shook my head, still processing everything myself. I thought Noah's father wanted nothing to do with us. That's what everyone implied, what I was led to believe. I never even tried to find him after those first few months when my calls went unanswered. I swallowed hard against rising emotions. I didn't know he was looking for us. Noah sat beside me, strangely composed amid the family chaos. He held one of the photographs, the one of him with Grandpa Ed and James at the zoo. Great-grandpa told me families sometimes need an earthquake to rebuild on stronger foundations, he said, tracing the outline of the 3 figures with his finger. I didn't understand what he meant until now. For a 12-year-old who had been told he didn't belong in the family photo, Noah suddenly seemed like the only Mitchell truly at home in the sprawling estate. Lily crawled onto the sofa beside her father, leaning her head against his arm. "Does this mean Noah gets to live in the lake house with the big tree swing?" she asked hopefully. "And can I visit him there?" Andrew smiled faintly, brushing his daughter's hair from her face. "I think that's up to Noah and Aunt Rebecca now." The anniversary party disintegrated entirely. There was no formal dinner, no toasts, no cutting of the elaborate 3-tier cake that had been delivered that morning. By evening, Noah and I were back in our apartment, sitting on our small balcony with mugs of hot chocolate, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. "Are you angry?" We all carry secrets and regrets, things we wish we'd said, stands we wish we'd taken. My father wasn't perfect. His courage came too late, wrapped in subterfuge rather than open honesty. But in the end, he chose love over appearances, connection over convention. Sometimes being excluded from one picture means you're being saved, for a better one, a truer one. Noah keeps both photographs on his desk now, the formal family portrait where he was asked to step aside, and the sunset image of our new, expanded family. Both are important, he told me. Both are true. If you've ever felt like you don't quite fit in the frame someone else is creating, remember that there are other pictures waiting to be taken, other stories waiting to be told. And sometimes, the family you're meant to have isn't the one you were born into. It's the one you build, one brave choice at a time. Thank you for watching. I'm Sarah, and this is the story of how my son's courage helped us all see what family really means. If this resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more stories about finding truth and belonging in this messy, beautiful life. Noah's question hung in the night air between us. "Are you angry?" His voice was small but steady, the way it always was when he was trying to be brave. I took a long sip of hot chocolate, buying myself time to untangle the knot of emotions inside me. The balcony of our apartment felt impossibly small after the grandeur of the Mitchell estate, but somehow safer, more honest. "I'm not angry at you," I finally said, setting my mug down on the little mosaic table we'd found at a flea market last summer. "I could never be angry at you for wanting to know your father." Noah nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful beyond his years. "But you're angry at someone." A humorless laugh escaped me. "I'm angry at a lot of people right now. At Grandpa Ed for keeping secrets, even if they were well-intentioned. At your father for not trying harder to find us directly. At my parents and siblings for their part in all of this." I sighed, wrapping my cardigan tighter around myself, against the evening chill. "But mostly, I'm angry at myself." "Why? You didn't do anything wrong." I reached over and took his hand. Even at 12, he still let me hold it sometimes when we were alone. "That's just it, Noah. I didn't do enough. I accepted what everyone told me about your father without question. I was hurt and proud and scared, and I let that stop me from looking deeper, from asking more questions." The city lights twinkled below us, a carpet of artificial stars. Our neighborhood wasn't fancy, just a modest apartment complex on the eastern edge of Hartford, but the view from the 6th floor had always been our favorite thing about it. "Great-grandpa's letter said James tried to find us before I was born," Noah said quietly. "That he kept looking." I nodded, the painful truth of it squeezing my chest. According to those documents, he went to Grandpa Ed when the family rejected his attempts to contact me. I was still pregnant with you then. I never knew. Dad and Mom told me he'd moved away, that he didn't want the responsibility. Noah was silent for a long moment, absorbing this. So Great-grandpa helped him find Us, but made him promise to wait until I was older to tell everyone? It seems that way. They were trying to respect my feelings, I suppose. Or maybe they knew how my parents would react. I stared into my mug, watching the remaining marshmallow slowly dissolve. It doesn't make sense, though. Why wouldn't Grandpa Ed just tell me directly? Maybe he thought you wouldn't believe him, Noah suggested. Or that you'd be mad at James for going behind your back. Or that you'd tell Grandma and Grandpa and they'd stop him from seeing me at all. I looked at my son in wonder. When had he gotten so perceptive about adult motivations? The problem with secrets, I said carefully, is that they rarely protect the people we think they will. Even kind secrets, even well-intentioned ones. They tend to hurt more in the end. Noah fidgeted with the envelope from Grandpa Ed, which hadn't left his possession since the disastrous anniversary party. Do you think we should contact him? James, I mean? The question I'd been dreading. What do you want to do? He didn't hesitate. I want to meet him. For real this time, not just sneaking around with great-grandpa. He looked up at me, brow furrowed. But only if you're okay with it. I took a deep breath. Then we'll contact him. Together. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Noah stayed home from school, too. We sat at our small kitchen table, the contents of Grandpa Ed's safe spread out before us. The legal documents were intimidating. Page after page of legal terminology about trusts, assets, property rights, and inheritance law. But the personal letters were what truly captivated us. There were dozens of them, meticulously organized by date. The earliest was postmarked 12 years ago, just weeks after I'd told my family I was pregnant. It was addressed to Grandpa Ed, not to me, and written in a hand I didn't recognize. Strong architectural lettering that favored sharp angles. Dear Mr. Mitchell, it began, you don't know me, but I'm writing in hopes you can help me reach Rebecca. My name is James Harrington. I'm the father of the child she's carrying. Your son and daughter-in-law have made it clear I'm not welcome to contact her directly, but I need her to know I never received her calls. I only learned about the pregnancy yesterday when I returned from an extended work assignment in Finland. By then, her number had been changed. Please, if you have any influence at all, tell her I want to be part of our child's life. I'm enclosing my contact information and will keep it current with your office indefinitely. My hands trembled as I read the letter aloud to Noah. All these years I'd believed James had abandoned us, had heard I was pregnant and conveniently disappeared. It had never occurred to me that my parents might have deliberately kept us apart. The next letter was dated 3 months later. Mr. Mitchell, thank you for your response and for the photograph of Rebecca at her baby shower. I understand her wish to proceed independently, though I suspect her family's influence in that decision. I respect her choice, but want to reiterate that I remain ready to provide support, emotional, financial, or otherwise, whenever she might want it. I've established a savings account for the child's future education, regardless of whether I'm permitted to be part of their life. Letter. After letter documented James's persistent efforts, his joy at learning of Noah's birth, his heartbreak at being denied visitation, his decision to respect my apparent wishes for distance while still sending child support checks to Grandpa Ed to forward to me, checks I had never received. Then, beginning when Noah was 7, the tone of the letters changed. Dear Edward, thank you for the unexpected visit yesterday. Meeting Noah was more incredible than I can express. He has Rebecca's determined spirit and curious mind. I agree with your assessment that abruptly entering his life might be disruptive, given what he's been told about me. Your suggestion of gradual introduction through occasional outings makes sense. I'm grateful for any opportunity, however limited. Noah's eyes were wide as I read this particular letter. So that's why great-grandpa started taking me on those special trips. We were secretly meeting my dad. The word dad hit me with unexpected force. Throughout Noah's life, he'd never used that word. It had always been my father. On the rare occasions he asked questions about his paternity. Formal, distant, hypothetical. But now there was a real person attached to that title. Someone who had been part of Noah's life for years without my knowledge. According to these letters, it seems that way, I confirmed, struggling to keep my voice steady. Grandpa Ed was creating opportunities for you two to develop a relationship. We continued through the letters, piecing together a shadow narrative of Noah's childhood. The visits disguised as educational outings with great-grandpa, the developing bond between father and son conducted entirely in the margins of our loss. Of the most recent letter was dated just 2 weeks before Grandpa Ed's death. Dear Edward, I've been thinking about our conversation regarding telling Rebecca the truth. I agree the time is approaching, especially now that Noah is asking more direct questions. Your health concerns make the matter more urgent, though I pray the doctors are mistaken. The trust documents are complete, as is my letter to Noah explaining everything. I remain concerned about Thomas's reaction, but as you said, some bridges can only be crossed when we reach them. Whatever happens, please know how profoundly grateful I am for your courage in reaching out to me 5 years ago. You've given me the greatest gift possible, a relationship with my son. I put the letter down, emotions churning. Grandpa Ed had known he was dying. He'd been preparing for this revelation, trying to ensure Noah would be protected once he was gone. The Lake House Trust wasn't just a property inheritance. It was Grandpa Ed's attempt to give Noah an unassailable place in the Mitchell family, a legacy that couldn't be disputed or diminished. Noah was quiet beside me, processing everything we'd learned. Finally, he looked up. There's a phone number on all the letters. Can we call him? My throat tightened. I wasn't ready. How could I possibly be ready to speak to this man who had been secretly meeting my child for years? And yet, looking at Noah's hopeful expression, I couldn't find it in me to say no. Let me make some coffee first, I said, buying myself a few more minutes. Then we'll call. While the coffee brewed, my cell phone rang. Andrew's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Becca, how are you holding up? His voice sounded tired, stretched thin. As well as can be expected, I replied, cautiously. What's happening over there? He exhaled loudly. Dad's been on the phone with the lawyers all morning. Mom hasn't come out of her room. Melissa is pretending nothing happened, which is her specialty. And He paused. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about Grandpa trying to tell us things we refused to hear. I waited, sensing he had more to say. I remember some of those conversations now, he continued. Like that Christmas when Grandpa mentioned expanding our definition of family, and Dad shut him down hard. Grandpa looked so disappointed in all of us. I didn't understand why at the time. And now? And now I feel like I've been complicit in something terrible, Andrew said quietly. I never actively kept you and Noah away like Mom and Dad did. But I never challenged it either. I just accepted that you'd made your choice, and that was that. His honesty surprised me. Andrew had always been the peacekeeper in the family, avoiding conflict at all costs. Why are you calling, Andrew? Because I want to be on the right side of this, whatever happens next. I want Lily to grow up understanding that family isn't defined by matching hair color in photographs. There was a rustling sound, as though he was moving to a more private location. Dad's talking about contesting the trust. He says Grandpa wasn't of sound mind when he set it up. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. It was established 5 years ago when Grandpa Ed was still actively running board meetings. That argument won't hold up. I know, but Dad's not thinking rationally right now. All he sees is that the crown jewel of the Mitchell estate, the Clearwater property that's been featured in every family Christmas card for 40 years, now belongs to the grandson he's barely acknowledged. I glanced at Noah. who was pretending not to listen while organizing the letters back into their chronological order. "What's your advice?" Andrew sighed. "Contact James Harrington before Dad does. I'm pretty sure that's his next move, to try. To negotiate with James directly. Cut you and Noah out of the equation altogether." "Negotiate what? The trust is ironclad according to these documents." "Yes, but Dad will offer money, lots of it, to make this go away quietly. To keep the Mitchell name untarnished in Oak Ridge circles." Andrew's voice dropped even lower. "You know how he is, Becca. He'll find a way to control the narrative unless you act first." After hanging up with Andrew, I stared at the phone for a long moment, then glanced at the number on James's letters. Before I could second-guess myself, I dialed. It rang 3 times before a deep voice answered. "Harrington." I froze, words evaporating. "Hello?" the voice prompted. "James, this is Rebecca Mitchell." My voice sounded strange to my own ears. "Noah's mother." The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Then, softly, "Rebecca, I've been hoping you'd call." "We found Grandpa Ed's letters," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "All of them. Noah and I. We know everything." Another pause. "I'm so sorry it happened this way. Edward and I disagreed about keeping things from you, but I respected his judgment that it was necessary to protect Noah's relationship with the rest of the family." Noah was watching me intently, his expression a mixture of anxiety and hope. I put the phone on speaker. "Noah's here with me." "Hi, Noah." James's voice warmed perceptibly. "I guess no more pretending our outings with your great-grandfather were just educational field trips, huh?" A small smile flickered across Noah's face. "The zoo trip was pretty educational. I learned a lot about South American primates." James laughed, a rich sound that seemed to vibrate through the phone. "You remembered every single fact the guide told us, recited them all to Edward on the drive home." I watched my son's face brighten at this shared memory, a memory I'd had no part in. The realization stung, but I pushed the feeling aside. "James, we've also learned about the trust Grandpa Ed established, the Clearwater property." "Ah." His tone shifted, becoming more cautious. "Yes." Edward was quite insistent about that. He wanted Noah to have a permanent place in the Mitchell legacy, something that couldn't be disputed. My father is already talking about challenging it. James didn't sound surprised. "The documentation is solid, Rebecca. Edward made absolutely certain of that. He had the trust reviewed by 3 separate legal teams." I heard papers shuffling in the background. "But that's not really why you called, is it?" No, it wasn't. The inheritance, while significant, felt secondary to the more immediate reality. This man was Noah's father. He had been part of Noah's life for years, and now we had to figure out what happened next. "Noah would like to see you," I said finally. Officially this time, without secrets. "I'd like that very much," James replied, his voice thick with emotion. "When?" I looked at Noah, who mouthed, "Today?" with such naked hope that I nodded despite my reservations. "Are you free this afternoon?" We arranged to meet at a small coffee shop halfway between Hartford and Burlington, neutral territory as James described it. After hanging up, I sat in silence for a moment, trying to process everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. "You okay, Mom?" Noah asked, squeezing my hand. I attempted a smile. "I'm processing a lot right now, but yes, I'm okay." I squeezed his hand back. "How about you?" "This is even more overwhelming for you." He considered this seriously. "It's weird, but also not weird. Like I always felt there was something missing in the story about my dad. And I always felt connected to Great-Grandpa Ed in a special way, different from how I felt about Grandma and Grandpa. Now I understand why." I studied my son's face. The dark eyebrows so unlike my family's fair coloring, the determined set of his jaw that I'd always attributed to my own stubbornness. For the first time, I allowed myself to see James in those features, to acknowledge the genetic heritage I'd tried to ignore. "Did you like him?" I asked softly. "On those outings with Grandpa Ed?" Noah nodded without hesitation. "He was always really nice, patient. He never talked down to me like most adults do, and he knew so much about buildings and design. He's the one who helped me with my balsa wood bridge for the science fair last year, the one that held all those weights. I'd marveled at that bridge, assuming Noah had designed it entirely on his own. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. You won first place with that bridge. James was really proud, Noah said, then flinched slightly, as though worried he'd said something wrong. I mean, he wasn't at the science fair or anything, but Great-Grandpa must have told him about it because next time we met, he brought me a book about famous bridges around the world. The book currently displayed on Noah's bedside table. A gift I'd assumed came from a school friend's parent. As we prepared to leave for the meeting with James, my phone rang again. My father this time. I let it go to voicemail. Whatever legal threats or manipulations he had planned could wait. Today wasn't about the Mitchell family legacy or the Clearwater property. It was about Noah meeting his father openly for the first time. We took my aging Honda Civic, driving north through Connecticut's lush spring landscape. Noah was uncharacteristically quiet beside me, staring out the window at the passing scenery. "What are you thinking about?" I asked finally, when the silence became too heavy. He turned to me, his expression serious. "What if he doesn't like me as much now that he doesn't have to keep it a secret? What if it was only fun, because it was like a spy mission with Great-Grandpa?" My heart ached at the vulnerability in his voice. "Noah, from everything I've read in those letters, James has wanted to be your father since before you were born. The secrecy was never the point. It was just the only way he could be in your life at all." "But what if—" "No what ifs," I said firmly. "Whatever happens today, whatever relationship develops between you and James, one thing will never change. You are the most important person in my life, and we'll figure this out together." We arrived at the coffee shop, a charming converted train station with outdoor seating overlooking a small river. And there, waiting at a corner table with a nervous expression that mirrored Noah's, was a man I recognized immediately from the photographs. Tall, with Noah's dark hair and thoughtful eyes, dressed simply in jeans and a blue button-down shirt, a leather portfolio on the table beside him. James Harrington, my son's father. A stranger who somehow knew my child in ways I didn't. He stood, as we approached, his eyes meeting mine first with an unspoken question, then shifting to Noah with undisguised emotion. "You've grown at least 2 inches since February," he said softly. Noah smiled shyly. "Mom says I'm going through all her grocery money in sneakers this year." Just like that, the ice was broken. We sat down, ordered drinks, and began the strange, halting process of getting to know each other, or in Noah and James's case, getting to know each other without the protective buffer of Grandpa Ed between them. James was nothing like I'd imagined during those years of absence. He wasn't careless or callous. He spoke thoughtfully, listened intently, and watched Noah with a kind of wondering admiration that couldn't be faked. When Noah mentioned his recent interest in environmental science, James pulled his portfolio closer. "I'm actually working on something related to that," he said, opening it to reveal detailed architectural drawings. "A net-zero energy educational center on Lake Champlain. Not far from Clearwater, actually." Noah leaned forward eagerly, asking questions about solar orientation and geothermal systems that I didn't even know he understood. James answered each one seriously, occasionally adding sketches on a napkin to illustrate his points. Watching them together, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Joy at seeing Noah so engaged, sadness for the years of connection I'd missed witnessing, and lingering anger at the circumstances that had kept us all apart. Eventually, Noah went to order a second hot chocolate, leaving James and me alone for the first time. "He's extraordinary," James said quietly. "Every time I see him, I'm amazed at the person he's becoming." "He is extraordinary," I agreed, "but I have to ask, why didn't you try harder to find us directly? Why go through Grandpa Ed at all?" James met my gaze steadily. "I did try, Rebecca. For 2 years after Noah was born, I sent letters to your parents' house, called every number I could find, even hired a private investigator. But your family made it very clear that my presence would only cause problems." "They had no right to make that decision," I said, a familiar anger rising. "No, they didn't," he acknowledged. "But when Edward finally contacted me 5 years ago, he convinced me that a hostile approach would only hurt Noah, that building a relationship quietly with his help was the better path. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe we both were." He looked down at his coffee. "If I could do it over, I'd have fought harder earlier, been more direct." Noah returned with his hot chocolate and a cookie the size of his palm, breaking the tension of the moment. "They had those chocolate chunk ones you like," he told James with easy familiarity, sliding half across the table to him. The simple gesture, this evidence of shared history, of Noah knowing James's preferences, hit me harder than anything else had. While I'd been building a life I thought was complete, whole pieces of my son's experiences had been developing without my knowledge. As the afternoon progressed, we tentatively discussed the future. James lived about 3 hours away in Burlington, not an impossible distance. He had a flexible schedule as a partner in his architecture firm. The Clearwater property, now legally Noah's, sat almost exactly halfway between our homes. "Maybe that could be our meeting place, at least sometimes," James suggested carefully. "If that wouldn't be too uncomfortable for you, Rebecca." The idea of spending time at a Mitchell family property, especially one that was now at the center of so much contention, wasn't appealing. But looking at Noah's hopeful expression, I found myself nodding. We could give it a try. As the sun began to set, we reluctantly prepared to leave. Noah hugged James goodbye with a naturalness that spoke volumes about their existing bond. James looked over Noah's head at me, his expression a mixture of gratitude and regret. "Thank you," he said simply, "for today, for being open to this. After everything." I nodded, not trusting my voice. This wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. There was still too much to process, too many years of absence to reconcile. But it was a beginning. As Noah and I drove home in the gathering darkness, he finally asked the question I'd been dreading all day. "Can I see him again soon?" I took a deep breath. "Yes. We'll work something out." I glanced at him, illuminated by the dashboard lights. "But Noah, there's still a lot we need to figure out. The trust, Clearwater, the legal issues with Grandpa and Grandma Mitchell. It's going to be complicated for a while." He nodded thoughtfully. "Great-grandpa said sometimes the most important things in life are complicated. That the measure of a person isn't whether they avoid complications, but how they handle them when they come." Grandpa Ed's wisdom, dispensed during those secret outings I knew nothing about. I felt a stab of grief for the old man who had tried, in his imperfect way, to build bridges while respecting boundaries that should perhaps have been challenged directly. "Your great-grandpa was a wise man," I acknowledged. "I just wish he'd trusted me with the truth sooner." Noah was quiet for a moment. "I think he was trying to protect everyone, even if he didn't do it perfectly." He fiddled with the envelope containing the trust documents. "What do you think will happen with Clearwater? Will we really get to live there?" The question hung between us as we drove through the darkening Connecticut landscape. What would happen with Clearwater? The property had been a near-mythical place in Mitchell family lore, the grand summer estate on Lake Champlain where generations had gathered for decades. And now, according to Grandpa Ed's trust, it belonged to Noah. Legally, it seems the property is yours, I said carefully, navigating a particularly winding stretch of road. But these things can get complicated when families are involved. Noah stared out the window, streetlights occasionally illuminating his thoughtful expression. I don't care about owning it, really. I just want to see it. James said it's beautiful. That there's a boathouse with an old wooden rowboat and pine trees that go right down to the water. More shared knowledge I wasn't part of. I pushed down the sting of exclusion and focused on the road ahead. We'll have to see how things unfold, with Grandpa and Grandma Mitchell. They might fight the trust. Because they don't think I deserve it? Noah asked bluntly. I winced. Because they're used to controlling everything, and this is something they can't control. When we returned to our apartment, 3 voicemails awaited me. One from my father, terse and demanding. Rebecca, call me immediately. These legal maneuvers of yours are unnecessary and damaging to the family. As though I had orchestrated Grandpa Ed's trust rather than discovering it alongside everyone else. The second was from Melissa, her voice brittle with forced cordiality. Becca, we should discuss how to handle this situation like adults. Mother is extremely upset, and none of this is helping Noah understand family responsibility. The subtle implication being that I was failing as a parent by allowing Noah to accept his inheritance. The third surprised me. My mother, speaking so quietly I had to strain to hear. Rebecca, please call me. Just me, not your father. There are things I need to say. I deleted all 3 without returning the calls. Whatever the Mitchells had to say could wait until morning. Tonight was for Noah and me to process everything we'd learned, to begin adjusting to the seismic shift in our understanding of our family. But sleep proved elusive. Around midnight, I found Noah sitting at our small kitchen table, Grandpa Ed's, letters spread out before him, reading them by the dim light above the stove. Hey, I said softly, pulling out a chair to join him. Can't sleep? He shook his head. I keep thinking about all the times Great-Grandpa took me places. All the times I was actually meeting James without knowing it. He looked up at me, eyes troubled. Did I do something wrong by not telling you? I didn't know it was a secret from you specifically. My heart clenched. No, Noah, you didn't do anything wrong. The adults in this situation made choices that put you in an impossible position. I reached across the table to cover his hand with mine. If anyone should be asking forgiveness, it's us. All of us who failed to be honest with you. He nodded, seemingly relieved. James said the same thing when I asked him today. He said adults sometimes make mistakes trying to protect people they love. I raised an eyebrow. When did you ask him that? When I was getting our drinks? Noah nodded again. I needed to know. It feels weird that someone who's supposed to be so important to me has been like a secret friend all this time. I wasn't sure how to feel about it. My extraordinarily self-aware child navigating emotional complexities most adults struggle with. And how do you feel about it now? He considered this carefully. Confused, but also kind of happy? Like I've had this extra person caring about me all along, even if it was complicated. He shuffled through the letters until he found a particular one. Did you read this one? From when I was 9? I shook my head, and he pushed it toward me. The letterhead indicated it was from Harrington and Associates architectural firm. The message was brief. Edward, I can't thank you enough for bringing Noah to the Boston project site yesterday. Seeing his face light up as I explained the sustainable design elements, watching him absorb everything so quickly, it was one of the proudest moments of my life. I know our arrangement is unorthodox, but please tell Rebecca, should the opportunity ever arise, that I am profoundly grateful for the remarkable person she is raising. The trust integrity, and compassion I see in Noah are a testament to her guidance. Tears pricked at my eyes unexpectedly. All these years, I'd carried the weight of single parenthood, believing I was entirely alone, that Noah's father was indifferent to his existence. To discover now that James had been watching from the periphery, admiring my parenting from a distance, it was a complex emotion I couldn't quite name. "What happens now?" Noah asked, echoing my own thoughts. "One day at a time," I replied, the only honest answer I could give. "Tomorrow, I'll speak with a lawyer about the trust. We need to understand exactly what Grandpa Ed established for you." "And James?" I met my son's hopeful gaze. "We'll figure out a way forward with James too, I promise." The next morning brought a cascade of complications. My father had already filed a legal objection to the trust, claiming Grandpa Ed had been unduly influenced. My mother called again, this time leaving a message that she was coming to Hartford and needed to see us. Melissa sent a formal-looking email outlining a compromise proposal that would keep Clearwater nominally in Noah's name, but under the management control of my father until Noah turned 30, effectively maintaining Mitchell family authority over the property for the next 18 years. I ignored all of it and contacted a trust attorney recommended by one of the other teachers at my school. Martin Chu had a modest office above a bakery in downtown Hartford, nothing like the imposing glass towers where the Mitchell family lawyers worked, but his reputation for handling complex family estate issues was excellent. "The trust is remarkably solid," Mr. Chu said after reviewing the documents Noah and I had brought. Edward Mitchell Sr. knew exactly what he was doing. The property was placed in an irrevocable trust 5 years ago, with Noah as the sole beneficiary upon Edward's death. "You, Ms. Mitchell, are named as the trustee until Noah turns 21, meaning you have fiduciary responsibility to manage the property in his best interest, but neither you nor anyone else can sell it or transfer it out of his name." "And my father's challenge?" I asked. Mr. Chu smiled thinly. "On what grounds? That Mr. Mitchell Sr. was mentally incompetent?" The trust was established when he was still serving as chairman emeritus of Mitchell Holdings. He continued making sound business decisions for years afterward. Undue influence? From whom? The trust predates James Harrington's regular contact with Noah. Noah, who had insisted on attending the meeting, leaned forward. "So it's really mine? They can't take it away?" "Barring some revelation we're not currently aware of, the Clearwater property and its maintenance." "Endowment belong to you, young man." Mr. Chu's expression softened. "Though I should warn you both. Families have ways of exerting pressure that have nothing to do with legal standing. Be prepared for emotional appeals, manipulation, perhaps even threats to other relationships." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Andrew. "Mom's on her way to you. Dad doesn't know. She's pretty determined." I showed the message to Mr. Chu, who nodded sympathetically. "Would you like me to be present for that conversation?" I considered it, then shook my head. "No, this is something I need to handle directly. But thank you for reviewing everything so quickly." We paid his consulting fee, surprisingly reasonable, and headed back to our apartment, stopping to pick up lunch on the way. Noah was uncharacteristically quiet, processing everything he'd learned. "A penny for your thoughts," I said as we waited for our sandwiches. He looked up, expression serious. "I don't want to hurt Grandma and Grandpa, but I also don't want to give up Clearwater. Is that selfish?" I considered my answer carefully. "It's not selfish to accept a gift that was meant for you, especially one given with so much thought and legal preparation. Grandpa Ed wanted you to have Clearwater, not just as a piece of property, but as a statement about your place in the Cow family." Noah nodded slowly. "I think he was trying to make sure they couldn't pretend I don't exist." Out of the mouths of babes. The stark truth of it struck me like a physical blow. That's exactly what Grandpa Ed had done. created an undeniable, immovable marker of Noah's legitimacy as a Mitchell. A 12-year-old child shouldn't need such protection, but Grandpa Ed had recognized the reality of our family dynamics more clearly than I had. We'd barely finished eating when the buzzer to our apartment rang. My mother stood in the hallway, looking smaller and more uncertain than I'd ever seen her. Elizabeth Mitchell had always been the embodiment of Connecticut WASP perfection, impeccably dressed, rigorously composed, never a hair out of place or an emotion too prominently displayed. But the woman before me now had shadows under her eyes and a tremor in her perfectly manicured hands. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. I stepped aside wordlessly. Noah emerged from his room, his expression guarded as he spotted his grandmother. "Hello, Noah?" my mother said, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You've grown since I last saw you. That happens over 4 years," he replied, not unkindly, but with a directness that made my mother flinch. She nodded, accepting the implicit rebuke. "Yes, I suppose it does." I gestured toward our small living room. "Would you like some tea?" "No, thank you. I won't stay long." She perched on the edge of our sofa like a bird ready to take flight at the first sign of danger. "I came to speak with you privately, but perhaps it's better if Noah hears this too." I sat in the armchair. Across from her, Noah choosing to stand beside me rather than join his grandmother on the sofa, a positioning that spoke volumes. My mother took a deep breath. What happened at the anniversary party was inexcusable. Melissa had no right to exclude Noah from the family photograph, and your father and I should have intervened immediately. She twisted her wedding ring nervously. "I want to apologize for that, and for many other things." I waited, unwilling to make this easier for her. Noah remained silent beside me, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "When you told us you were pregnant, we reacted badly," she continued. "We were concerned about your future, about your unfinished education, about the absence of a stable partnership." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But the truth is, we were also concerned about appearances, about what people would say, about how it would reflect on the family name. On you and Dad, you mean?" I corrected quietly. She nodded, surprising me with her candor. "Yes, on us. On the image we'd cultivated so carefully." She looked directly at Noah for the first time. "It was wrong, and I've had years to regret it." "Why now?" I asked, unable to keep the skepticism from my voice. After nearly 13 years of distance, why the sudden remorse? My mother's composure cracked further. "Because I've lost so much already, and I'm afraid of losing whatever chance remains." She reached into her handbag and withdrew an envelope similar to the one Grandpa Ed had left for Noah. "Your grandfather left this for me, to be delivered, after his death. I received it the day after the funeral." She handed it to me with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of Grandpa Ed's distinctive stationery, his angular handwriting filling the page. "Elizabeth, my dear daughter-in-law, if you're reading this, I've finally gathered the courage to die, though I've lacked the courage to say these things to your face while living. Forgive an old man's cowardice. You and Thomas have built what appears to be a perfect life. The right address, the right connections, the right charities on your resume. But in pursuing this perfection, you've sacrificed something far more precious, an authentic relationship with your extraordinary daughter and grandson. Rebecca possesses a strength of character that cannot be taught in the private schools and elite universities you value so highly. She chose love and responsibility over convenience. She chose to raise a child on her own rather than capitulate to family pressure. In doing so, she displayed more of the true Mitchell spirit than those who bear the name through mere accident of birth. And Noah, that remarkable boy, carries the best of our family's traits without any of our worst flaws. He is curious, kind, and refreshingly honest. He deserves to know his heritage, all of it, including the parts we've tried to hide. I've taken steps to ensure Noah's place in the family cannot be erased or diminished. You may resist this initially, as change is difficult after so many years of rigid adherence to appearance. But I urge you, Elizabeth, choose substance over appearance in whatever time remains for you. Choose to know your daughter and grandson as they truly are, not as you wished them to be. It is never too late to rebuild what has been broken, but it requires the courage to admit when we have been wrong. With enduring affection and hope, Edward. I looked up from the letter to find my mother watching me intently, tears gathering in her eyes but not falling, the lifetime habit of emotional restraint too ingrained to break completely. Dad has filed a challenge to the trust, she said quietly. He's convinced himself it's about protecting the family legacy, but it's really about control, about not being the one to make the decision. She leaned forward slightly. I'm not here to defend him or to ask you to give up what Edward wanted Noah to have. I'm here because I don't want to lose another 13 years. I don't want to be the grandmother whose only a name Noah hears occasionally. Noah shifted beside me. You weren't just a name, he said unexpectedly. Great-grandpa used to tell me stories about you, how you were the best organizer of the annual Mitchell Christmas party, how you could remember everyone's favorite dessert, how you taught him to make proper English tea. My mother looked startled, then deeply moved. He said those things about me? Noah nodded. He said you were always kind to him, even when Grandpa Thomas was being difficult. That you sent him flowers every year, on his birthday without fail, even though you thought no one knew it was you. I glanced at my son in surprise. This was yet another aspect of his relationship with Grandpa Ed that I'd known nothing about. These stories shared, this more nuanced picture of our family painted in private conversations. Dad has always been the forceful one, my mother acknowledged. I found it easier to accommodate than to challenge. She straightened her shoulders slightly. But Edward was right. There comes a time when accommodation becomes complicity. She met my gaze directly. I won't support Thomas in fighting the trust, and I'd like permission to get to know my grandson, properly this time without conditions or judgment. I felt Noah's hand tighten slightly on my shoulder, a silent request to consider his grandmother's olive branch. But years of hurt and rejection couldn't be erased by one conversation. One letter from beyond the grave. This is going to take time, I said finally. Trust isn't rebuilt in a day. My mother nodded, accepting this boundary. I understand. I'm prepared to wait, to earn back what I foolishly discarded. She rose to leave, smoothing her skirt with habitual precision. There's one more thing you should know. James Harrington called your father this morning. My breath caught. What? Why would he contact Dad directly? Thomas reached out to him first, offering a substantial sum to relinquish any claim to Clearwater and to... She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with what she needed to say. To terminate contact with Noah. Noah stiffened beside me, his expression darkening. He tried to pay my father to stay away from me? Again? My mother winced at the again, but nodded. James refused categorically, quite forcefully from what I understand. He told Thomas that no amount of money would induce him to give up his relationship with his son. She allowed herself a small, surprising smile. I believe the exact phrase was, not for all the property in Connecticut, and certainly not for a relationship with a child I've already waited far too long to know. Despite everything, I felt a flicker of respect for James. Standing up to Thomas Mitchell was no small thing. The man had built his career on intimidating opponents into submission. Dad won't give up easily, I warned. He hates losing control. Of anything, especially family matters. No, he won't, my mother agreed. But he's not accustomed to opponents who can't be bought or intimidated. Between James's refusal and my decision not to support his legal challenge, She straightened her shoulders. Well, Thomas may need to accept that he's finally encountered a situation he cannot manipulate to his advantage. After my mother left, promising to call in a few days to arrange a proper visit with Noah, we sat in thoughtful silence for several minutes. "Do you think she means it?" Noah asked finally. "About wanting to know me?" I considered this carefully. I think Grandpa Ed's letter affected her deeply, and I think perhaps she's been unhappy with the status quo for longer than she's been willing to admit, even to herself. Should we trust her? A complex question from my increasingly perceptive son. I think we can be cautiously open to her efforts without immediately trusting that everything has changed. People who've spent decades operating one way don't transform overnight, even when they sincerely want to. Noah nodded, processing this. Like how Great-Grandpa knew he should have told us about James directly, but couldn't quite bring himself to challenge Grandpa Thomas openly. Exactly. I squeezed his hand. Speaking of James, how do you feel about what Grandma said? About your father refusing Dad's offer? A small, pleased smile crossed Noah's face. Good. Really good, actually. He hesitated, then added, I texted him after we got home yesterday. Is that okay? I thought since we'd already met officially, it would be all right. I blinked in surprise. You have his number? Noah looked sheepish. Great-Grandpa gave it to me last year, said it was for emergencies if I couldn't reach him. I never used it before yesterday. Another boundary crossed, another parental decision circumvented. And yet, looking at my son's face, so hopeful, so eager to embrace this new connection, I couldn't find it in me to object. It's okay, I assured him. What did you text about? Just to say I had a good time meeting him. Officially, I mean. And that I hoped we could see Clearwater together sometime. He fidgeted with the edge of his shirt. He said he'd like that very much. Whenever we decide the timing is right. Whenever we decide. James was being careful not to overstep, to respect my role as Noah's primary parent, despite the excitement of their newly acknowledged relationship. Another small point in his favor. My phone buzzed with a text from Andrew. How did it go with... Mom, Dad's on the warpath after his call with Harrington. I showed Noah the message and typed a quick reply. Better than expected with Mom. Not surprised about Dad. We'll call you later. Noah looked thoughtful. Uncle Andrew seems different from Aunt Melissa, more on our side. I think Andrew has always been caught in the middle, I explained. He wants to please our parents, but he also has his own sense of right and wrong. Melissa has always aligned herself completely with Dad's perspective. It's how she secured her position as the favorite. That's sad, Noah observed. Trying so hard to be what someone else wants instead of being yourself. The simple wisdom of children. Yes, it is sad, and ultimately unsatisfying, I think. My phone rang, James's number appearing on the screen. I hesitated, then answered, putting it on speaker so Noah could hear. Rebecca, I hope I'm not interrupting, James began, his voice carefully neutral. I wanted to let you know about a conversation I had with your father this morning. My mother just left, I replied. She mentioned he'd contacted you. A brief pause. Ah, well, I want to be completely transparent. He offered a significant amount of money for me to, quote, step back and let the family handle things appropriately. Did he specifically ask you to stay away from me? Noah asked, leaning toward the phone. Noah, hello. James's voice immediately warmed. Yes, essentially that was the request. I made it very clear that wasn't going to happen. Thank you, Noah said simply. You don't need to thank me for that, James replied, a hint of emotion breaking through his composed tone. No amount of money could ever be worth missing another day of your life. I felt a complicated twist of emotions. Gratitude for his loyalty to Noah, lingering anger over the years of separation, and an uncomfortable awareness that I was now unavoidably linked to this man for the rest of our lives, whether I fully trusted him yet or not. Your father also mentioned he's filing a legal challenge to Edward's trust, James continued. I don't know if that affects any plans you might have regarding Clearwater, but I wanted to offer my help if needed. I'm familiar with the property. Edward took me there several times. Of course he had. Another piece of family history conducted, away from my awareness. We're working with a trust attorney, I said. The challenge doesn't seem to have much legal merit, but we're proceeding carefully. That's wise. James paused, then added, I was also wondering. Noah mentioned in his text that he'd like to see Clearwater. If you're comfortable with it, I could meet you both there this weekend. I have the access codes for the gate and main house. Edward made sure I knew them for emergencies. I glanced at Noah, who was practically vibrating with eagerness beside me. Despite my reservations about moving too quickly, I found myself nodding. That might work. Let me check with Noah's attorney first. Make sure there are no legal concerns with us visiting before the challenge is resolved. Of course. Just let me know. Another pause. And Rebecca. Thank you for being open to this after everything. I know it can't be easy. After we hung up, Noah could barely contain his excitement. Do you think we can really go this weekend? See Clearwater for the first time? I ruffled his hair affectionately. If Mr. Chu says it's advisable, yes. But Noah. I made sure he was looking directly at me. This is all happening very quickly. It's okay if you need time to process, to adjust to all these changes. We don't have to rush everything. He considered this with his characteristic thoughtfulness. It does feel fast sometimes, but also like pieces finally fitting together? Like finding answers to questions I didn't even know how to ask. He leaned against me slightly. Is it weird that this feels right, even though it's kind of overwhelming? I pulled him into a hug, marveling at his resilience, his emotional intelligence. Not weird at all. Just remember, whatever happens with Clearwater, with the Mitchells, with James, you and I are a team. That doesn't change. He hugged me back fiercely. The best team, even better than the Red Sox. High praise indeed from my Boston-obsessed son. That evening, as Noah worked on his science homework, I called Andrew to get a clearer picture of the fallout from my mother's visit and James's refusal of my father's offer. Dad's taking it about as well as you'd expect, Andrew reported dryly. He's called 3 different law firms and is talking about having Grandpa Ed's mental competency retroactively evaluated. I sighed heavily. That won't work. Mr. Chu says the trust is solid. I know. Dad knows too, deep down. But he can't accept that Grandpa Ed deliberately removed Clearwater from his control. Andrew lowered his voice, presumably to avoid being overheard. The bigger issue is Mom. She came home and told Dad she won't support the challenge, that she wants to rebuild a relationship with you and Noah without conditions. How did he take that? Andrew gave a short, humorless laugh. Let's just say dinner was canceled and he's sleeping in the guest room. I've never seen Mom stand up to him like this. 40 years of marriage, and I think this is the first time she's actually said no to him about something important. I absorbed this, trying to imagine my mother, always so careful to maintain peace, to follow my father's lead, finally drawing a line. Do you think she means it? That she'll maintain this position even under pressure? I don't know, Andrew admitted. But Lily asked when she could see her cousin Noah again, and Mom said very soon, right in front of Dad. So that's something. Progress, however small. What about you, Andrew? Where do you stand in all this? He was quiet for a moment. I should have done more, Becca. Years ago, I should have stood up for you and Noah instead of taking the path of least resistance. He sighed. I can't change that now. but I can try to do better going forward. Starting with supporting Mom in this stand she's taking. After we hung up, I sat on our small balcony watching the city lights, trying to make sense of the rapid changes in our lives. In less than 48 hours, everything I thought I understood about my family had been upended. Noah had discovered a father who had never abandoned him, who had been secretly part of his life for years. Grandpa Ed had revealed himself to be both more courageous and more cautious than I'd ever suspected. My mother was finally finding her voice after decades of silence. Even Andrew was choosing sides in a family that had never permitted such disloyalty. And me? I was still figuring out how to navigate this new reality. How to co-parent with a man I barely knew. How to protect Noah while allowing him to embrace these new relationships. How to forgive the deceptions while appreciating the good intentions behind them. One thing was certain. We couldn't go back to the way things were before. The old wounds had been exposed, the long-buried secrets revealed. Whatever came next, whether reconciliation or further conflict, at least it would be based on truth rather than comfortable lies. My phone lit up with a text from James. No pressure about this weekend. Clearwater isn't going anywhere. We have time. A consideration I appreciated more than he knew. Noah appeared at the balcony door, homework completed, eyes bright with anticipation for what lay ahead. Mom, I found Clearwater on Google Maps. Want to see it? I smiled and patted the chair beside me. Show me. Together, we bent over his tablet, examining satellite images of a property that had existed only in Mitchell family mythology for Noah until now. A substantial main house nestled among pine trees, a boathouse extending into the clear blue waters of Lake Champlain, winding paths through carefully maintained grounds. It was exactly as James had described it. Great-grandpa said it was the most peaceful place in the world, Noah murmured. That you could sit on the dock at sunset and feel like you were the only person on Earth. I put my arm around his shoulders, pulling him close. Then I think we should definitely see it for ourselves. This weekend, if Mr. Chu approves. He leaned into me, contentment radiating from him despite all the uncertainty still ahead. I think Great-grandpa would be happy about that. Looking at the satellite image of Clearwater, the property Grandpa Ed had quietly, deliberately preserved. For this child he'd recognized as worthy even when others hadn't. I felt certain Noah was right. Friday afternoon, Mr. Chu called with good news. There was no legal impediment to us visiting Clearwater before my father's challenge was resolved. In fact, he added, physical possession of the property could strengthen Noah's claim should the matter proceed to court. It demonstrates intent to exercise his rights as the beneficiary. I thanked him and immediately called James to confirm our weekend plans. We would drive up Saturday morning and stay overnight, returning Sunday afternoon. James would meet us there, showing us around the property he already knew from his visits with Grandpa Ed. As I packed overnight bags for Noah and myself, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. I heard you're going to Clearwater tomorrow. May I bring something by for Noah before you leave? A gift from me, no strings attached. I showed the message to Noah, who was carefully selecting which books to bring for the trip. What do you think? Do you want to see Grandma before we go? He considered this with his usual thoughtfulness. I think we should give her a chance. Great-grandpa believed in second chances. When did he tell you that? Noah's expression turned soft with remembrance. The last time I saw him, about 3 weeks before he died. He seemed different that day, more serious. He told me that, in life, we rarely regret the second chances we give, but often regret the ones we withhold. He looked up at me. I think he knew he was sick then. Another conversation I'd known nothing about, another piece of wisdom passed directly from Grandpa Ed to Noah without my knowledge. I pushed down the familiar twinge of exclusion and nodded. All right, I'll tell her she can come by in the morning, before we leave. My mother arrived at 8 o'clock sharp the next day, dressed in the Mitchell version of casual, pressed khakis and a cashmere sweater, pearl earrings her only jewelry. She carried a large gift bag and a smaller package wrapped in blue paper. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, her voice more tentative than I'd ever heard it. "I won't keep you long. I know you have a drive ahead of you." Noah hung back slightly, watching his grandmother with cautious interest. She smiled at him, a genuine expression that softened her usually composed features. "I brought something I thought you might like to have at Clearwater," she told him, holding out the gift bag. "And something that's long overdue." Noah accepted the bag and peered inside, his eyes widening. He pulled out an old-fashioned fishing rod, beautifully crafted with a wooden handle and brass fittings. "That belonged to your great-grandfather," my mother explained. "He taught all the Mitchell children to fish with it at Clearwater when they were about your age. Edward would want you to have it." Noah ran his fingers over the polished wood reverently. "Thank you," he said quietly. My mother nodded, then handed him the smaller package. "This is something different. Something I should have given you long ago." Noah unwrapped it carefully to reveal a leather-bound photo album. Opening it, he found it filled with photographs of me as a child and teenager, at birthday parties, school events, summer camps, holidays. What struck me immediately was that these weren't the formal portraits that typically adorned the Mitchell home. These were candid shots capturing genuine moments. Me laughing with cake on my face at age 6, jumping into Lake Champlain as a teenager, receiving a science award in high school. "I kept these separately from the family albums," my mother explained, glancing at me. "Thomas preferred the professional photographs for display, but I always loved these candid moments. They show the real Rebecca, not just the posed version." I leaned over Noah's shoulder, stunned to see these images I hadn't known existed. "I don't remember you taking most of these." "I was always taking pictures when you weren't looking," she admitted. "It was my way of capturing the daughter. I sometimes felt I couldn't reach." She turned to Noah. "I've started a section for you at the back. It's mostly pictures from family events when you were very young before." She trailed off, unable to directly reference the estrangement she had participated in. Noah flipped to the back pages, where a handful of photographs showed him as a toddler at Mitchell family gatherings. In one, Grandpa Ed held him on his knee, both of them grinning identically. In another, he played with building blocks on the floor of the Mitchell living room, while family members conversed in the background, unaware of the photographer capturing the moment. "I'd like to add more," my mother said, her voice catching slightly. "If you'll allow it." Noah looked up from the album with a small, tentative smile. "I'd like that." She nodded, visibly moved. "There's one more thing." She reached into her purse and withdrew an envelope. "This is for you, Rebecca. A letter from me, not Edward this time. Things I need to say but might not express well in person." She pressed it into my hand. "Read it when you're ready." After my mother left, promising to call next week to arrange a proper visit, Noah and I finished loading the car. The fishing rod was carefully secured in the back seat, the photo album tucked safely into Noah's backpack. I slipped my mother's letter into my purse, deciding to save it for later when I had time to process whatever it contained. The drive to Vermont took just over 3 hours, the scenery growing progressively more picturesque as we traveled north. Noah alternated between excited chatter about what Clearwater might be like and comfortable silence as he watched the landscape transform from Connecticut suburbs to Vermont wilderness. We turned off the main highway onto a narrow, tree-lined road that wound along the eastern shore of Lake Champlain. After several miles, a discreet sign marked a gated entrance, Clearwater Est, 1928. James had texted the access code, which Noah eagerly punched into the keypad. The wrought iron gates swung open silently, revealing a long driveway that curved through dense pine forest. "This is like something from a movie," Noah whispered, pressing his face to the window as we drove deeper into the property. The driveway eventually opened onto a circular courtyard, and there it was, Clearwater. The main house was a gracious New England estate, white clapboard with dark green shutters, a wide wraparound porch supported by elegant columns. Not ostentatiously large, but substantial and beautifully proportioned, it had clearly been designed by someone who understood the harmony between building and landscape. James's car was already parked in the courtyard. He emerged from the front porch as we pulled up, looking slightly nervous, but pleased to see us. "Welcome to Clearwater," he said simply, as Noah tumbled eagerly from the car. The interior of the house was every bit as charming as its exterior. Wide plank pine floors softened by faded oriental rugs, comfortable furniture arranged to take advantage of views through large windows, built-in bookshelves filled with well-worn volumes. It felt lived in and loved, not like a showplace, but a genuine home. Great-grandpa kept it exactly as it was when his parents were alive, Noah observed, running his hand along a mahogany banister. James nodded. He said it was the one place where memories weren't painful. We spent the afternoon exploring the property, the main house with its 7 bedrooms, the charming guest cottage closer to the lake, the boathouse with its collection of vintage wooden boats carefully preserved. Noah was particularly enchanted by a treehouse nestled in a massive oak near the water's edge. "Your great-grandfather built that for your mother and her siblings when they were children," James explained, as Noah scaled the ladder eagerly. "He added the rope swing when Andrew was about your age." I looked at him in surprise. "How do you know that?" James smiled slightly. "Edward was a natural storyteller. Every corner of this place had a family history attached to it. He shared those stories during our visits here." Noah called down from the treehouse platform. "Mom, you can see all the way across the lake from here. Come look." As I climbed up to join him, I reflected on the strange reality of our situation. Here I was, at a Mitchell family property I'd visited countless times as a child, now being shown around by a man who had never been a Mitchell, but somehow knew its history better than I did, while my son claimed his rightful inheritance as Grandpa Ed's chosen successor. The afternoon mellowed into evening, and James proved to be a considerate guest host, helping without overstepping, offering information without dominating conversation, giving Noah attention without excluding me. He'd brought groceries and prepared a simple dinner, which we ate on the screened porch overlooking the lake as the sun began to set. "This is exactly how Great-Grandpa described it," Noah said softly, watching the golden light dance across the water. "He said the sunsets at Clearwater make you believe in magic." After dinner, Noah decided to explore the books in the library, a cozy wood-paneled room with floor-to-ceiling shelves and deep leather armchairs. His departure left James and me alone for the first time since our coffee shop meeting days earlier. "Thank you for making this possible," he said after a moment of slightly awkward silence. "For Noah, but also for me. Being here with him, openly, without pretense. It means more than I can express." I studied him in the fading light. This man who shared my son's features, who had been part of his life in ways I was only beginning to understand. "Why did you agree to Grandpa Ed's secrecy?" I asked finally. "Why not just come directly to me once you found Noah?" James considered the question seriously. "At first, I was simply grateful for any contact at all. After years of being completely shut out, even limited access seemed miraculous." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "But as time passed, I began to question the arrangement. Edward always had a reason why the time wasn't right to tell you. Noah was too young to understand. You were struggling with a career transition. The family situation was too volatile. And you believed him?" "I trusted his judgment about his own family dynamics," James admitted. "He knew Thomas in ways I couldn't, understood the potential fallout." He sighed. "But about 6 months ago, I told Edward I couldn't continue this way. That Noah deserved honesty and so did you. That's when he showed me the trust documents for Clearwater and explained his plan. The plan that would reveal everything after his death, when he wouldn't have to face the consequences, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. James nodded. I disagreed with that approach, told him it wasn't fair to any of us, but he was adamant that this was the only way, to ensure Noah's place in the family couldn't be erased or diminished. So you went along with it? I did, he acknowledged quietly, and I've questioned that decision every day since. I convinced myself it was in Noah's best interest, but perhaps I was just afraid of losing what limited access I had, afraid of disrupting the life you'd built together. His honesty was disarming. I'd been prepared for defensiveness or justification, not this straightforward acknowledgement of uncertainty. I won't pretend I handled everything correctly, James Key continued. But please believe that every decision, however flawed, came from a place of genuine care for Noah. Before I could respond, Noah reappeared clutching an old leather-bound volume. I found Great-Grandpa's journal from when he was building the boathouse. It has all his original sketches and notes. The moment for deeper conversation with James passed as we both turned our attention to Noah's discovery. The three of us spent the evening poring over Grandpa Ed's detailed journals, which documented not just the construction of various buildings on the property, but also family events, fishing expeditions, and philosophical musings about nature and legacy. Later, after Noah had gone to bed in the room that had once been my father's childhood bedroom, I found myself drawn to the dock. The night was clear, stars reflecting on the still surface of the lake like scattered diamonds. I sat at the edge, feet dangling just above the water, and finally opened my mother's letter. My dearest Rebecca, it began in her precise handwriting. There are no words adequate to express my regret for the years of separation, for the pain my silence has caused for the relationship with my grandson that I foolishly sacrificed on the altar of appearances and peace. I have spent 40 years being Elizabeth Mitchell, Thomas's wife, the perfect Mitchell family matriarch. Somewhere along that journey, I lost Elizabeth Barrett, the girl who once had her own dreams, her own voice, her own courage, the girl who would never have stood by while her daughter and grandson were pushed to the margins of family life. Your father is a complicated man. His need for control stems from wounds inflicted long before we met. A father who was physically present but emotionally absent, a family name that was both blessing and burden. I do not offer this as an excuse for his behavior toward you and Noah, merely as context for my own failures. I chose, again and again, to accommodate his rigidity rather than challenge it, to preserve a facade of family harmony rather than fight for substantive connection. Edward saw through this pretense years ago. His letter to me was not the first time he expressed disappointment in my choices. On numerous occasions, he urged me to reach out to you independently, to know Noah regardless of Thomas's position. I always found reasons to delay. Next month would be better. Next year, the timing would be right. Now I find myself at 70 years old, looking at photographs of a grandson I barely know, wondering if reconciliation is even possible after so much time, so much hurt. Whether you can find it in your heart to allow me into your lives again is a question only you can answer. I can only tell you that I am finally ready to be Elizabeth Barrett again. The woman who makes choices based on love rather than appearance, who recognizes that family is something far more profound than coordinated outfits in professional portraits. I have told Thomas that I will no longer support his efforts to control Clearwater or to limit Noah's place in the family. This has created significant tension between us, but for the first time in our marriage, I find I can bear his disapproval if it means taking a step toward what matters most. Whatever you decide about our relationship going forward, please know that I am profoundly sorry and profoundly proud of the woman and mother you have become, without my help, and often despite my failures. With love and hope, Mom. Tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. The letter wasn't a magical solution to years of hurt, but it was something I'd never expected from my mother. Genuine contrition paired with a clear commitment to change. I carefully refolded it and slipped it back into my pocket, gazing out at the starlit lake while trying to sort through my conflicting emotions. I became aware of someone approaching along the dock and turned to see James, his figure silhouetted against the lights from the house. "Sorry to intrude," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. "I saw you from the porch and wanted to make sure you were all right." I gestured for him to join me. "Just thinking, there's been a lot to process these past few days." He sat down, leaving appropriate space between us. "I imagine so. For what it's worth, I think you're handling everything with remarkable grace." A brief, humorless laugh escaped me. "Is that what this is? Because inside I feel like I'm barely keeping up." "That's the definition of grace under pressure," he observed quietly, continuing forward despite the difficulty. We sat in surprisingly comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the stars and their reflections on the water's surface. "Noah asked me something interesting before he went to sleep," James said eventually. "He wanted to know if I thought Edward had made the right decision, keeping our connection secret all these years." I turned to look at him. "What did you tell him?" "The truth, that I think Edward made a well-intentioned mistake. That secrets, even those meant to protect, usually cause more harm than good in the end." He glanced at me. "Noah has a remarkably mature perspective on all this. He said he wished things had happened differently, but he's grateful that at least now everything is in the open." "He's always been able to see the bigger picture," I said, unable to keep the pride from my voice. Even as a little boy, he could step back from his own immediate feelings and consider other perspectives. James smiled. "That's a rare quality at any age. He's extraordinary, Rebecca. You've done an amazing job raising him." The simple, genuine compliment touched me more deeply than I'd expected. "Thank you. That means a lot." "I hope you know, I don't have any intention of disrupting the life you've built together," he added carefully. "I just want to be part of Noah's life in whatever way makes sense for both of you." I considered this. "What does that look like to you, practically speaking?" He thought for a moment. "Regular visits, perhaps. Phone calls and messages between them. Maybe Noah could spend part of summer breaks with me in Burlington if he wanted. Do I have a guest room that could be his whenever he visits?" He hesitated, then added, "But I'm open to whatever arrangement you're comfortable with. You're his mother. You've been there every day of his life. Nothing changes that." His acknowledgement of my primary role, his willingness to follow my lead, rather than assert rights or demands, it eased something tight in my chest that I hadn't realized was constricting. "I think we can figure something out," I said finally. "Noah clearly wants you in his life, and after everything that's happened, denying that connection would just create another kind of secret, another kind of pain." The relief on James's face was palpable. "Thank you. I know this isn't easy." "No," I agreed. "But maybe necessary things rarely are." The next morning dawned clear and bright. Noah was up early, eager to try out Grandpa Ed's fishing rod from the dock. James joined him, showing a patience I hadn't expected as he untangled lines and baited hooks. I watched from the porch, sipping coffee and trying to imagine what our lives might look like moving forward. Noah dividing his time between Hartford and Burlington, holidays potentially split between families, co-parenting with a man I was only beginning to know. My phone buzzed with a text from Andrew. "How's Clearwater? Melissa told Mom you'd gone up for the weekend. Dad still isn't speaking to either of them." I typed back, "It's beautiful. Noah loves it. Sorry about the fallout with Dad." Andrew's response came quickly. "Don't be. Maybe it's time someone stood up to him. Lily wants to know when she can come see the treehouse Noah told her about." I smiled at that, realizing Noah must have texted his cousin already. Soon. Once things settle a bit. Later that day, as we reluctantly prepared to leave, Noah stood on the porch gazing out at the lake. "Can we come back next weekend?" he asked, turning to me with hopeful eyes. "We'll have to see. There's still your grandfather's legal challenge to deal with, and I have work. You have school. But we will come back, right? Clearwater is ours now." I glanced at James, who was loading the last of our overnight bags into my car. "Yes," I said finally. "Clearwater is ours now, and even if Grandpa Thomas somehow manages to challenge the trust, that doesn't change the most important thing that happened this weekend." Noah looked at me curiously. "What's that?" "We started building something new, something honest." I put my arm around his shoulders. "A family defined by truth rather than appearances." He leaned into me. "Great-grandpa would like that." "I think he would," I agreed. "Though I wish he'd trusted us with the truth while he was still alive." "Maybe he did the best he could with what he knew," Noah suggested thoughtfully. "Like you always tell me, we can only make decisions based on the information we have at the time." My wise, compassionate son, finding grace for the imperfect adults in his life. James approached, keys in hand. "All packed up. I've shut off the water main and set the security system." He looked at Noah with undisguised affection. "I was thinking, if your mom agrees, maybe next time we could take out one of the old wooden canoes. There's a small island about 20 minutes across the lake that Edward and I used to visit." Noah turned to me, eyes pleading. I nodded, and his face lit up with joy. As we drove down the long driveway toward the gate, Noah twisted in his seat to watch Clearwater recede behind us. "It doesn't feel like goodbye," he said. "It feels like the beginning of something." Looking in my rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of James standing on the porch, watching us leave. Not a replacement for what we had built together, Noah and I, but an addition, unexpected, complicated, but perhaps ultimately enriching. The Mitchell family would never be what it once was. The careful facade had cracked beyond repair. But maybe what would emerge from those broken pieces would be stronger, more authentic, more worthy of preservation than what had come before. My mother's letter had ended with hope. Grandpa Ed's final arrangements had been built on hope. Hope that truth would ultimately triumph over appearance. That genuine connection would prove more durable than carefully constructed pretense. As we passed through the gates of Clearwater and turned back toward our life in Hartford, I found myself sharing that hope. Not naive optimism that everything would be simple or easy, but a grounded belief that honesty, however difficult, offered a better foundation than secrets ever could. Noah settled back in his seat, Grandpa Ed's fishing rod carefully cradled in his lap, the photo album tucked safely in his backpack. Evidence of a heritage that could no longer be denied, connections that could no longer be severed. "I was thinking," he said as we merged onto the highway. "Maybe we could invite Grandma to Clearwater sometime. And Uncle Andrew and Lily. Not Grandpa, not yet. But maybe the others?" I reached over to squeeze his hand. "I think that's a wonderful idea. One step at a time." He nodded, satisfied, and turned his gaze forward, toward Hartford, toward the future, toward whatever came next in our newly expanded world. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.